All right, welcome back. Today we've got a little bit of a short episode. Joseph's at work, so it's just gonna be me and Ethan today. But it was a pretty not so busy weekend, I guess,
It's a good.
unless you were watching the NBA All-Star game, of course, which don't really know why. I'm not really sure how you're thinking about your time as of that point because you probably regret watching the All-Star game. At least that's just what I've seen from a lot of people online.
Yeah, it's a good episode to have a shorter or it's a good time to have a shorter episode now because honestly, like you said, nothing much, not a lot going on. I mean, our basketball team's still kind of struggling. Last time we talked, we had one game. It was UCLA where I feel like IU came so close to like pulling away, or not even pulling away, to tying them or even taking the lead, but they always fall short. They got within four, I think. I don't even know, like 5 times. It was a good game. Don't get me wrong, but it was a little disappointing, especially coming off the win against Michigan State, who is a powerhouse team and could be a title contender for for March Madness. But obviously Purdue on Sunday, who actually just lost to Michigan State, so that'll be a good rematch. It's here, so I'm kind of excited for that.
Yeah, and I think honestly, I feel like this time I think we have a pretty good chance against Purdue just because I mean, I don't know if you watched the Purdue Wisconsin game or like saw any highlights of it or anything, but Wisconsin was kind of playing aggressive like we were when we played Purdue, except that it looked like they were a bit more aggressive, but I mean, that seems like that's the way to beat Purdue because they play with more finesse. I feel like they're not really like they're not as aggressive when it comes to like defense, especially like in the middle. But yeah, I think if we just implement our same strategy as last time against Purdue and not make any stupid decisions in the last minute of the game, then I think we could beat them.
Yeah, I think there's a big chance, and obviously it's a rivalry game. And the last time we played them, it was in Mackey. Now it's in Assembly Hall. Obviously, both very big and well-known college basketball atmospheres that are tough to play in no matter what. And especially if it's a rivalry game, it's going to be packed. It's a Sunday afternoon. No one's doing anything. There's no more NFL. So what else is there to do? It's to watch IU versus Purdue, a big rivalry game, Big Ten. So it'll be interesting. And I think too, Purdue knows what's on the line. Like if they win this game against IU, they're ahead of Wisco in Big Ten standings. Obviously, they're 11-5 in the conference. Wisco's 11-4. And because of the losses they've had between Michigan, Wisconsin, and Michigan State, it's starting to add up, and they have teams catching up to them. Like now they have Maryland slowly climbing up. UCLA, who just beat IU, is slowly starting to come up. They're only one game behind. It's slowly starting to form into a more competitive, conference, and we started to see that. And I don't think anyone coming into this season thought both Michigans would be 1 and 2 in Big Ten standings. I mean, we saw early in the season Oregon was dominating. Now they're 7-8 in the conference. I think they were ranked top 10 at one point, but they've kind of fallen off. And obviously Rutgers, who I think debatably has been a bigger disappointment than IU has, just because of the players that they have with obviously Ace Bailey. Rutgers was ranked before the season, and now they're not. So is IU, but Rutgers has been struggling heavily this year. But yeah, the Big Ten Conference is starting to form, and I'm excited to see in the future how the tournament layout's going to look for us.
Yeah, and I mean now that you mention it, like Rutgers, just because of how bad they've been, like we haven't even talked about them yet this year. Like they had, I think, the number one and like either number 2 or number 3 freshman, like
Dylan
that they
Harper and Ace
recruited.
Bailey.
Yeah, and now they're 5-10 in the conference. They're 12-14 overall. But I feel like because of at least like our transfer portal class and just like how well our football team did, like there's just such expectations. So like the spotlight was on us rather than Rutgers, despite them having like the talent that they had just recruited. But yeah, the Big Ten standings are very interesting to look at, especially seeing both Michigan, like you said, both Michigans are at the top. And you've got Wisconsin and Purdue and Maryland, and then UCLA is just kind of hanging in there too with their 10-6 conference record, the last double-digit winning conference record out of the Big Ten. But I guess right now, out of these 18 teams, who do you think is probably going to win the Big Ten championship?
It's so tough because I feel like you can go in so many directions. Honestly, I'm gonna go. I hate to say it. I'm gonna go Michigan State. I think overall they have just been such a dominant force. And I mean, when you look at the roster, like no shade throwing, I'm not throwing any shade at Michigan State, but I feel like I can name at least one player on every single team in the Big Ten except Michigan State. Like I feel like every team has a big name that kind of just pops out, like Indiana, Umar Balo, the big transfer from Arizona, Rutgers, Ace Bailey, and just so on and so forth. But for Michigan State, I couldn't name one. But when we played them, they just looked absolutely dominant. I mean, obviously we beat them, but the way that they've played against Purdue when they just won last night, it was crazy. They were able to hold off a Purdue Boilermakers team who historically just absolutely insane. Great coach, which I hope he comes here, but he won't. But yeah, I think Michigan State has a very dominant team. And I think they typically do in college basketball. I wasn't really following it much until coming to college, but I kind of had a background of it. And obviously Michigan State, one of those big teams. We haven't really seen their spark in the past couple of years, if you want to call it. But I think this year they've really turned it around. And I think they're a legit contender. You can make the argument for Purdue, you can make the argument for Wisconsin, Michigan, but I just think Michigan State, they're just a gritty team, and I think because of that, and just because of the way they've been playing, I think they're going to be able to pull it out.
Yeah, I mean, Michigan State is always, I feel like they've always consistently been in the March Madness tournament since like at least 2014. Like I feel like they're always there. But like you said, like the last couple years, they've been kind of like middle number ranked. So they'd be like kind of like a 7, 8, or 9 seed instead of like a 4 or 3 seed like they have been in the past. But this year, like they could very well get back up into that 3 or 4 seed. But I kind of hope Michigan wins just because I really like what Dusty May's been doing up there in Michigan, and also he's a former IU guy, so it'd just be great to see him win. Um, and also it's his first year. It's his first year at Michigan, so it would just be absolutely insane to see a first year head coach in basketball where there's 18 teams in the conference. Out of all of them, you get up on top, which would be really great. I mean, I like at the beginning of the year, I remember like seeing Michigan like get pick up Dusty May from FAU and bring all those guys up there. And I just had that feeling. I was like, they're gonna probably be some kind of dark horse, but they're not even a dark horse at this point. They're running the conference, which is insane.
Yeah, and good for Dusty, man. I'm glad he's been able to flip the program, and obviously he's one of the people that are in contention for the head coaching job for us next year, which I think, or no, no, wait, I'm thinking wrong. Who was I thinking? Oh, I was thinking of Brad Stevens. Oh, I don't know why I said that, but yeah, no, Dusty, yeah, obviously IU legacy, like, he's great. I'm happy for him in Michigan, but I just can't stand to see Michigan win basketball, football. It's so sickening, and we need a switch. So whether it's Michigan State, I mean, maybe it's not Michigan. It's still in Michigan, but it's a little different. But I'd rather see Michigan State win than Michigan. But I genuinely do think Michigan State is going to win, and I think too, just like kind of drifting away from it, but like the SEC just insanity. Just what I've seen. Like I think the SEC has just been ridiculous in terms of how many teams they could send to March Madness, and just how competitive it's going to be between Auburn, Tennessee. It's ridiculous. They have the 1, 2, 4, 7, 6, 15, 24, 21, 17. Like that is absolutely insane. Like if we were in the SEC, we would be like bottom 3, yeah, we would be like the fourth to the bottom, which is not good. But yeah, absolutely insane what we're seeing from the SEC. I think in terms of basketball, I think we have it in football. SEC take over basketball. It's unbelievable what they've been doing.
Yeah, I feel like the SEC just kind of, I mean, they were good last year, but they just doubled down on that this year. I mean, I don't know what they were doing over there because I didn't really see a lot of things they were doing in the transfer portal and stuff. But I mean, I knew they were good from last year. So I guess maybe like the only thing I really saw was that Florida picked up that one freshman who's like 7'4" or something like that. Like he's just insanely tall, but he's I think redshirting, so he's not even starting for them this year. So next year, Florida is already going to be in a good spot. I think just having someone like that on their team. But like,
You said 7-4, right?
uh, yeah, 7'4". I think it's 7'4".
Try 7-9.
7'9". Oh my god. Okay, yeah. So 7'9".
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people are also thinking, like, including myself, that like the Big 12 was going to be a little bit better just because they picked up teams like Arizona from the Pac-12 and like just. I always thought Pac-12 basketball was underrated because like Arizona was good last year, so was Colorado, who the Big 12 also has this year. Oregon is also solid. UCLA, USC is like kind of like the Pac-12's equivalent to Ohio State, where they would always have like a bunch of talent and then not be
Flop.
yeah, they would flop. But I mean, now I think USC is going in a different direction because they picked up the Arkansas coach, so maybe they'll be able to turn it around. Um, but yeah, the rankings themselves are just insane to look at. Just seeing all the SEC teams, you see a couple ACC teams in there. Like Louisville's is at the 25 spot, which I haven't seen them in the ranking in a while. But I remember like after last year, Louisville just was probably one of, if not like the worst team that was in college basketball, and now they're ranked 25. And you also have St. John's, who's at 10 right now, which I think is crazy. They're 22-4 right now, and I think they only have one loss in the Big East, which is huge for them. I mean, they've just been getting better and better each year, and they could be a sneaky team just because I mean, Big East is like the SEC football equivalent to basketball. Like all the good teams are in the Big East. Like it's or at least like the when it comes to like more old blue blood traditional basketball.
Yeah, and speaking of Big East, like my boys at in Stores, Connecticut, it's been a struggle fest for us this year. I'm a little disappointed. I was a big UConn fan. I mean, I'm from Connecticut, but yeah, the way that they lost to Seton Hall, that was a pretty bad loss, if you want to call it, for UConn. But no, yeah, I completely agree, and I think another sleeper team from the Big East that I'm semi confident could be a long run in the tournament is Marquette. I think Marquette could be very good this year. I think a lot of people talk about St. John's and like how well they've been this year and how they're ranked in the top 10 for first time in a long time. But I think Marquette is really good. I really do believe they have had some tough losses. I mean, they lost to Dayton, they lost to Iowa State, but they beat Wisconsin. I mean, they lost to Xavier. I mean, they've lost to some Big East teams. I'm not getting that wrong. Like St. John's, they lost to UConn, they lost to, but I think they are a very powerful team offensively. I think sometimes there's points where they struggle, but when they're consistently putting up 80, 85 points a game, it's hard to stop that. And you don't really see that in March Madness. Like you'll get limited to 60, 70. I think if Marquette is doing what they're doing, just like beating teams by like a good amount, like they had Seton Hall by 17, they had Seton Hall again by like 24. I mean, like they've had big wins, and I think overall it'll transfer into the tournament, and I think they could be a big powerhouse. But yeah, the Big East is it's a small but mighty conference, and they don't have as many teams as like the bigger conferences do, like the Big Ten and the SEC, like we said. But I mean, there's still a lot of power in there between UConn, Creighton, Marquette, and St. John's.
Yeah, I mean it's the same thing with the ACC too. Like they're not there's not a lot of teams in that conference, but like I feel like those teams in the ACC always somehow find a way to like just make a run in the tournament. Like I mean NC State last year, Clemson last year, like they went on an insanity run and they weren't really projected to do all too well. And also, I mean, I think the only tournament game from even last year that just came to mind where it was like higher than a 60, 70 point game was Colorado versus Florida, where it went 102 to 100. And that game might have also gone into overtime because I think it was like tied at 90 or something before it went to overtime. But I remember that just being an insanely high scoring game, which is something like you said, like we never really see that. But I just found that interesting that you know both those teams have just kind of been in the realm of conversation at least this year for good teams. Well,
Yeah,
Colorado not. I don't think Colorado's ranked anymore right now, but
no, they're not. But yeah, like going back to your point on like the ACC and all those teams, like yeah, like and you talk about like one team that makes like a sneaky run in the tournament. I think one that we're seeing this year is Clemson.
yeah,
I think it's like it lines up so perfectly. Like I think obviously you have Duke, who is just unstoppable every year. Louisville, who's kind of sneaking their way in there to the rankings for the first time in a while, and then you have Clemson, who just hanging in there, 21-5, 13-2 in conference play. Obviously, the conference isn't as strong as some of like the bigger conferences, and obviously UNC, they've had a story this year in terms of their disappointment. Like they're in the same spot as IU. I mean, they have an easier conference, so to speak, but the struggles they've had overall has just been exponentially higher than
yeah,
IU's, I think. But I think Clemson, yeah, I think Clemson's really good this year too. I mean, they've had really big wins. If you want, I mean, they beat Duke, they beat UNC, who was supposed to be good. They beat Kentucky. Like I mean, they've beaten two top four teams in the country at that time, which it's very rare, and they're not ranked. So I mean, like this is what I'm saying. Like if they've beaten Duke and they go into the ACC tournament, we could see a potential rematch between these two teams for a bigger spot in the tournament. And I think Clemson could potentially do that. And we've already seen it once. I mean, it's hard to beat teams twice in a season. We always say that.
yeah.
But I think there's a big chance Clemson can do it. And obviously Duke, you can make the case with Cooper Flag and everyone they have and how electric playing at Duke is. It's impossible. And obviously like they're up there with Kansas, us, Purdue, all the big stadiums. But yeah, I think Duke and Clemson, powerhouse of the ACC. And I think if there's one team that can make a run that isn't so obvious, so to speak, because you can say Duke clearly, but I'd give it to the 18th ranked Tigers.
Yeah, I feel like at least like I heard you bring up Kansas. Kansas, I don't know. Did you see any bit of the BYU Kansas game yesterday?
No, I
It
didn't
was like BYU just crushed them.
really.
Yeah, yeah, it was insane. Like I think it was at BYU, but it was 91-57 BYU,
Oh,
which
maybe I did see this. Yeah,
j-
it's
is
ridiculous.
nuts. Like that's ridiculous. I mean, I mean, Kansas has like such a great roster. They had a lot of returning players, and they're at 17-10, which isn't bad. I mean, they're still ranked and everything, but I mean, I definitely don't think that this was. I don't think they're performing up to what their expectations are. I mean, especially like as a blue blood uh, school, like when you're in one of those schools, you're always trying to be like the best. But like in 17-5 is not not the best. But I mean, they could Kansas. I do think though they do have the roster to like possibly make a run.
I mean,
But I just had to bring up that BYU game because I remember seeing the score of that last night and I was like appalled.
and it's crazy too because Kansas, they're already on the cusp of being ranked and unranked. They're 17-9, and I think they're honestly getting gifted a shot here because their conference record is not good at all. I mean,
No.
it's like 8-7. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 8-7, and they're sitting sixth. And obviously, you have really good teams above them between Texas Tech, Iowa State, Arizona, and Houston. But yeah, the Kansas is they're in a struggle. They're in a struggle right now, and I think their last three games of the season are going to be tough. Ninth ranked Texas Tech, fifth ranked Houston, 19th ranked Arizona. Like that's a rough schedule to end the season. And I think just because there are 68 teams in the tournament, no, wait, 64
Well,
or
wait.
68. Yeah,
It is
yeah.
68 because the playing games.
Yeah, the playing games. I think they're gonna. I think they'll still get it no matter what. But like, can't like their seeding isn't gonna be what they think it will be because those games are tough. At Houston is gonna be a rough game. I think Houston always a powerhouse, defensive
Yeah.
minded team. But yeah, hosting Texas Tech and hosting Arizona, that's good for them. But like they got to pull out at least two of those because without wins there, it's going to be tough to get a good seed in the bracket this year.
Yeah, I mean, they'd probably get a double-digit seed, honestly, if they lose all 3 of those games and then underperform in the conference. If they win, like, maybe 1 or 2 of those, they could maybe sneak in at, like, a 9. I don't know. But, I was just looking at the Big 12 rankings, and I didn't even realize this, but Colorado is actually last in the Big 12 right now.
Mhm.
They're 1 and 14 in the conference, and they're 10 and 16 overall. So the fall off of Colorado basketball after last year is insane. But I think they did have a lot of people like go to the draft and stuff. But still, like I don't know. I just thought they were gonna be better. But I think one of the teams that I think could actually be like a sleeper team, though, at least from the Big 12, is Arizona. Caleb Love has been doing an amazing job leading that team. It's like they lost Umar Ballo, but it I feel like honestly it was probably good for Caleb Love because that kind of gave him a chance to step up a little bit more as a leader and actually lead his team. Because I feel like Ballo was the leader of Arizona, like when he was there, like when he first went over there after transferring from North Carolina. But ever since Ballo left, it seems like Caleb Love's kind of taken charge of the team and is being the leader that they need him to be.
Yeah, and I think yeah, if they had Ballo hypothetically, it would be a very different team, I think, because when you look at it from our standpoint, what we're seeing from Ballo, he's more of just like that facilitator, like get the ball in his hands in the post, let him set the screens, run the pick and roll. Like, it becomes very obvious. Like there's a routine. And like here in Arizona now, Caleb Love can just do whatever he wants. He's got the ball in his hands. He's gonna take the most shots every game. You're gonna see him play the majority of the minutes from that guard position. I mean, he's got that senior leadership. And obviously, yeah, like you said, he's doing a great job. I mean, they're 18 and 8, 12 and 3 in the conference, which is, and it's not like it's a bad conference either. Big 12 is tough. I mean, they've
Yeah.
had tough losses to ranked UCLA, ranked Duke, and ranked Texas Tech, but they've had huge wins too. I mean, they've beaten Iowa State, they've beaten Texas Tech once. Um, They've beaten Cincinnati. They've beaten West Virginia. Like again, they've beaten a lot of AP top 25 teams, and I think I can agree with you here that if there is a sleeper team in the Big 12, it could be Arizona. And yeah, I also just find it funny too. Like speaking of Colorado basketball, that at the very beginning of the season, like after all their hype from football, that Shadur and Travis Hunter were in basketball jerseys, like getting hyped up with them, like doing the runouts just for them to be struggling 1 and 14 in the conference, 10 and 16 overall. Like it was just a setup for failure. But yeah, no, I think Colorado basketball is very funny. And I like to your point, I think Arizona, I think, yeah, be a big sleeper team coming into this. But also too, like now that I think about it, I mean, Kansas, they were let's not say Kansas is bad because I don't think they are.
No, they're not.
And they were once the best team in the country, ranked, I guess. I mean, they've beaten ninth ranked North Carolina at the beginning of the season. They beat Duke, and Duke, you know how good they are. They beat in Iowa State. Like they have good wins, and I think if it doesn't go their way at the end of the season, where they win a couple of these ranked games, I think they could be a team that has a lower seed that ends up making a major run. I think obviously Hunter Dickinson is just a monster under the hoop, but I think Kansas could make a big run here if they're seeded in that 10, 11, 12 like you were talking about. But the Big 12, there's a lot still left to play. I mean, 5 games, a lot. 3 of them are ranked, so we'll see how they do.
Yeah, there's a lot to be desired at this point in the season with all the conferences starting to like at least all the teams in each of the conferences starting to gear up for that championship tournament. And all of the formats are very unique just because I mean like Big 10 now has 18 teams, SEC has 16. I think ACC also has 16 as well, and I think Big 12 has like 17 or something like that. Like they
Around
have
it.
an insane amount of teams.
Around it, yeah.
Uh yeah, like it's hold on one. Yeah, they also have 16. Big 12 has 16 as well. So like those brackets are going to look very interesting and just because of how competitive some of these conferences have been, especially the SEC this year, just how deep that conference is, it is going to be so interesting to see like a team maybe like Old Miss who's ranked, but maybe they don't get to have like the best spot in the tournament because the team's above them. It's like they could be one of those teams that maybe instead of getting like 3 rounds worth of buys or 4 rounds worth of buys or however many buys the SEC tournament has, uh, they have like 2 less buys than like Tennessee, and then they go and they fight their way to the SEC championship title game, and then they win and then get a good spot in the tournament, kind of like what NC State did last year. I mean, NC State I think was seeded last in that tournament. Like they fought their way to that championship game and they won, and then they go to the Final Four. So I mean, at least with the SEC, I think that is definitely a strong possibility.
Yeah, and it's very different than basketball too, or basketball. It's very different than football too, because obviously they only have 2 teams make the tournament, so to speak, in their
Yeah.
championship bracket. But here, it's very different. You're gonna have multiple teams make it. You're gonna have these ranked games in interconference, and that'll be very exciting. And that's why I think a lot of people are drifting away from like NBA and just we can get into that for a few minutes before we have to like wrap it up. But
Yeah.
like that's why so many people are tuning into these games now, because before the Luka trade, the Anthony Davis, and all that stuff, it just there's a lot more competition within college basketball. I think there's a lot more even matchups you can come up with. I think the possibilities are endless in terms of the transfer portal. Anything can happen at any given moment, and I think having these tournaments and the expansion, especially of like these bigger conferences like the Big Ten, where we now have 18 teams, it's going to be cool to see what teams can kind of put their name out there if they're not in a great spot to make the tournament, like Indiana. Like if you're on the bubble, can you make a run in the Big Ten tournament to kind of get your face out there and get one of those lower spots eventually? There's still a lot of basketball to play before March rolls around. I mean, obviously we're like 12 days away from it, but there's still 5 games there, and then you have the tournament. So for IU and like all these other like bubble teams that aren't necessarily in the rankings right now, there's still a chance for you to kind of make a name for yourself and kind of climb the ladder to hopefully sneak into one of those 64 teams.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I think at least talking about the like comparison between college basketball and the NBA, I think, and I've noticed this kind of last year too with the NFL versus college football. I think there's just more parity in college sports, not just like possibilities and like more matchups, because the league is so much bigger. Like there's 100 plus teams in like in the college at the college level, whereas like the NFL and NBA, there's only like 30, 40 teams. But like there's so much, like it just feels like there's so much more at stake. Like the talent is a lot more spread out. There's like there's a lot more like parity, just the rivalries. There's so many different rivalries, new rivalries that get developed. Just a lot on the line to like win a national championship. But like it feels like, and the NBA All-Star game is like huge teller for this, I think. But just it feels like the players play with more effort in college than they do at the NBA level. And I don't know 100% know why, but like at least especially at the All-Star game. Like you just see them like you see the players just pretty much walking up and down the court. Like there's no running really. They're just like throwing the ball around and then eventually like they get it in the basket. But like there's not a lot of like movement or defense or anything like that. Like it's just like they're there just to like be on TV, it feels like to me.
Yeah, and I think also too, like reaches to a more familiar audience. Like for college sports, obviously it's going to reach college students. It's that's what it's kind of directed towards. I mean, you're going to support the team or the college that you go to, so there's that. But then also too, like alumni. Like obviously, there's major alumni networks between here, Penn State, and all the big colleges that we see and universities. So obviously, you're going to have those fans kind of check in and see how they're doing. So the fan engagement is also, I think, a big part of the reason why college sports is starting to become more of what it is now. And I think with the introduction of NIL and just the possibilities of where players can go, I mean, we see players bouncing from team to team now. It's just there's so much that happens. I mean, yes, it's hard to keep up with, but when you're watching it year to year and you kind of see how your team does, it's cool to see because of the outcomes. they switch. Like it's not like the NFL or NBA where if you are a bad team, you're going to be that way for the next 5 years until you draft a generational quarterback like Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes or whatever. No, you can bring in some of these newer guys from other universities that either one play really well or two have great potential. And obviously for Indiana and not even just their players standpoint, from coaching standpoint, the opportunities there are also endless between where which direction they can go in. Because obviously Woodson stepping down, so do you go and hire former NBA coach and Brad Stevens, or do you hire someone from that's affiliated with college basketball already? There's so many opportunities for change for each program. And like you said, the amount of teams that we have too, there are so many and there's so many places to choose from. It's not like you're doing a one-to-one team trade. No, and not at all. It's like a comparison to here is just like the Luca trade that we saw in the NBA. That's like a once in a lifetime type thing. You don't see a generational like a 20 not 20-year old but like a high 20-year-old player play or get traded to another team with a 40-year-old superstar. You're not going to see that here. You're going to see these 18 to 22, 23-year-olds kind of intermix with each other, travel across the country with each other. And I think like the expansion also impacts that too because of where everyone is traveling. There's so much going on in college sports that it becomes more entertaining for people. And I think now, like it's not even like sports related, but like the attention span that new generations have has become so much lower that there needs to be entertainment for them to stay engaged. And I think because of college sports, they've been able to stay engaged because of what happens almost every day. And there's like new games, new ranked games that we see almost like very often. So I think with that, that's why I think college sports are the way they are right now.
Yeah, and like I agree 100%. And I think I did really like the point in particular about the alumni basis, like just how alumni are very involved with universities. I feel like they've become even more involved than in the past because like whenever I look on the news, I always see like the Michigan like NIL fund like grows X amount of money, and like the IU has like the second. I remember going to the Coach Sig talk last night, and he talked about like how Texas has the largest alumni base, and we have the second largest alumni base. And because we've tapped into that a little bit more, like our football program has been able to grow the way that it has, and like just talking about like how that is a huge factor as to why we were able to bring in the players that we did and hire Sig, and also just like, you know,
Extend them.
yeah, exactly. Like extend them and just build what we've built. And we're starting to see more schools like Arizona State or Colorado where their alumni base are starting to get more involved. And it's like like they're investing into their sport. So like you're almost buying viewers without actually buying viewers.
And it's requiring too, like these people to like kind of buy into the team. Like, do you believe in your team? Do you want to see him succeed? Obviously, everyone wants to see the team succeed, but like, what are the possibilities that happens? And with that, you're gonna kind of make your decision if you're gonna kind of provide and help out based off of like if you're successful or not. And obviously, Signetti, huge success. I mean, you saw his 8-year extension, like we all saw it, like ridiculous. No one thought that an Indiana football coach first year is going to get an 8-year extension because of what he does with our program. I mean, absolutely insane what he did. And I didn't get to go to the talk last night, unfortunately, but yeah, I heard it. I heard it was great, and I heard he did like the chant at the very end, which was really
Yeah.
funny. But yeah, I think overall, I think college sports is really on the rise, and I think NIL. I think it's a help, but there needs to be a certain control and limit to what you can do with it because I think it's kind of being taken out of proportion with how much money is being given to these players. I think obviously like the top universities for each sport, like the Alabamas of football, the Michigans of football, and then basketball wise, you have Auburn, Kansas, Duke, all these guys. It's crazy to see just how much money is being given to all these players and BYU like on that topic from then they have the number one recruit for 2025. I think it's AJ Dibansta. I don't know how you say his last name, but you can look it up. I forget, but he is the number one recruit and he's going to BYU. So it's gonna be very interesting just how much money everyone gets. But I think fan engagement is very important. I think that's why college sports is the way it is right now.
Yeah. And also like it's very easy to engage, like especially like when you're in the stadium too. Like, I feel like the NFL is starting to kind of tap into this a little bit, where like they're starting to make it more of like a college atmosphere type thing. Like the Bengals, for example, like they'll do like a stripe out or a white out where like everyone wears white, or like they'll have like black shirts and orange shirts for certain sections of their stadium and stuff. Like they're at least the NFL is starting to kind of adapt to that. It feels like the NBA at least is kind of a few steps behind on that. But yeah, I think that's a good point to end on for today. Next week we'll, I guess, talk more about IU basketball and Purdue. Looking ahead to the Big Ten tournament, because that is going to be coming up, and I guess
Any NFL draft updates?
any draft updates, combine updates, and probably looking ahead to
making the March Madness
the
brackets,
March Madness tournament.
That would probably be an episode within itself. Just by making a bracket, we all like discuss like who we think's gonna win what and what. So
yeah, honestly, we might have to make that like a multi-part episode, because I just remember last year when I was recording and I had to like rush through the end because I just couldn't get through. And now there's gonna be 3 of us all going through
true.
it. So
we'll make it a 2-part episode.
Yeah, we might have to make maybe 3. Imagine a 3-part episode for March Madness.
Be crazy.
I mean, it would be good though. It would be good.
It would 100% be good. And we did this for the college bracket and the and like our NFL stuff. So we'll see what happens. Maybe we all don't pick the same the winner this year like we did for the college football players, where we all take Oregon and everything gets wiped after they lose. So
I mean, at least with college basketball, the odds of that happening where we all pick the same person are very low.
Yeah.
But last year we probably all would have picked the same UConn. I'm assuming we probably all would have picked UConn.
I would have, just because I'm from there and I'm just biased. So, but
yeah. So we'll see you guys next week, and keep watching basketball, except the NBA All-Star.